of this webinar, Journey to Resilience in the Americas. Now, I would like to welcome our second panelist for the session and moderator, who are going to be talking about building resilience for climate. I would like to welcome Nicolas Ramirez, CEO of the GBC Costa Rica, to moderate this session and take us through this very interesting topic. Thank you, Nicolas, for joining us. We can see you now.
Thank you, Juanita. Good morning and welcome to the second session of today's webinar, where we will be focusing on building resilience for climate. For those of you who had a chance to review the UN synthesis report that came out last week, you will have noted that there are results that give hope and others that increase a sense of urgency. On one hand, it noted that the efforts and intentions put forth by 113 parties to the Paris Agreement through their updated NDCs, updated as of July 21st, do move the needle significantly towards our global goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, on the other hand, the urgency feels much greater when we see the projections of what to expect in strong commitments, if strong commitments are not made by some of the world's major greenhouse gas emitters, and if financial mechanisms are not put in place to help developing countries implement their goals. The Built Environment Day at COP26 represents an enormous opportunity at a vital moment in time for our well-being and that of our future generations. Hopefully, world leaders will take firm action in response to the recommendations put forth by experts in order to create the impact that is needed on a global scale. Please keep in mind that we will have a couple of poll questions during this session, so be ready to participate, as we'd really like to have your feedback. As well, our panel has prepared an ambitious agenda for our session, but we do have a limited time duration. So I want to let you know that if we do not have time to answer your questions, we will try to follow up by passing them on to our panelists and try to get an answer back to you. Before we get into our panel and our poll questions, I would like to briefly introduce our two panel members. First of all, we have Antonio de la Roca, who is a proactive civil engineer passionate about social, urban, and youth issues with a strong call to serve society. He has experience leading projects and programs to reduce poverty and create system-changing solutions. He is the regional director for Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean for the NGO Techo International, where he has been working since 2012. He is also an independent consultant for Ecolonor BCIE, preparing a feasibility study for a green housing program in Guatemala. Antonio is a member of the Association of Urban Territorial Planners of Guatemala, where he's been on part of the board since 2019. We also have with us this morning, Lee Golding DeSantis. She is the Executive Director of Sustainability Products and Solutions, whose mission is to deliver world-class decarbonization solutions to JCI's valued customers. Prior to JCI, from 2014 to 2021, she served as the Chief Operating Officer at SparkFund, a DC-based fintech company she co-founded, where she pioneered an innovation subscription model to drive client sustainability and energy goals. Prior to SparkFund, Lee Golding specialized in clean energy policy, program, and technology support for government, public, and private sector clients at ICF International. She holds a master's in environmental engineering and a bachelor's in civil engineering. Lee and Antonio, would you like to say a few words to greet our audience? We can start perhaps with Lee and then Antonio.
There we go. Sorry, I need to unmute. Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. Happy to be here, and hello, Antonio. Yeah, you know, when we're thinking about why this is such an important topic to JCI, and I'm really thrilled to be here today. You know, sustainability really is our business at JCI, and we've been laying the foundation with our thoughts and our actions for a long time. You know, JCI was one of the first companies to sign the Global UN Compact in 2004. We're powering a lot of our plants with renewable energy. So sustainability is really, really inherent to the core of what we're doing, and resilience is a really key part of that. We've really turned our attention to the sustainability of and resilience of buildings of our customers. And we've been trying to focus on knocking down barriers to green buildings for our customers. And that's evident through some of the recent offerings that we've come out with, like the Net Zero as a Service offering, which we launched in July, and a lot of our Healthy Building Suite. So, I think there are a number of ways to go about achieving climate goals, but buildings are 40% of climate emissions, carbon global emissions globally. And so if we're going to tackle climate change, we really need to go after buildings. So I'm thrilled to be part of the conversation talking about infrastructure and climate today. Thanks.
Excellent. I think it's my turn now. Okay. It's great to be here. Thank you very much to WGBC for having me. It's really nice to be with you, Nicolas and Lee. Well, in Techo, I don't know if you know the NGO, but Techo is a platform that invites individuals and institutions to join forces and take action to restore hope for millions of families and people that are living in poverty. So we are transforming communities by building homes, empowering community leaders, and improving the lives of thousands of families in slums in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think this topic is related to what Techo does because we have experience in response to emergencies for more than 20 years. And I would say that resilience is an intrinsic part of what we can find in communities that don't have enough resources so they can get to the next day. So that's why we must implement programs, taking that in account and knowing that resilience is already happening, but maybe not in the right way in the communities or slums in Latin America.
Great, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you both for being here with us today. To get things started, let's begin with our first poll question. If you could help us with that, Juanita, please. Well, we start with our first poll question, which is very simple, not a tough one. We just want to know what you think about in terms of, are green buildings resilient buildings? One single answer only, please. While our audience fills out that poll, I'd like to pose the same question to both Antonio and Lee. If you'd like, we can start with you, Antonio. What do you think about that question? Or what is your answer to that question? Sorry.
Thank you. Well, resilience in its most basic concept is the ability to adapt to adverse situations and have positive incomes or results. So I think green building is an adaptation of the construction or building sector to face the challenge by the sustainable development of the future of our cities. And this adaptation is addition to being, well, is very successful and brings proven positive results in terms of substantial decrease in the use of resources. So I would say yes.
Okay, thanks. How about you, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are many attributes of green buildings that also contribute to the resiliency of those buildings. So those could be things like the increased ability for passive survivability for that building to be able to withstand a power outage, but also maintain comfort, maintain ability to keep occupants safe. And that those things are driven by, better insulation, by lower energy use, potentially by clean energy as part of that building. And so a number of those elements, I think, overlap a lot. And so a green building can absolutely be an incredibly resilient building. And I think looking at it through that lens provides a lot of opportunity for many dual benefits.
Excellent. Thank you both. Excellent. Juanita read my mind. I was going to ask her for the results. So we can see here, our panel seems to be right on with our audience, more or less a similar response. We have 67% saying yes. Obviously, these are very broad and general questions, but at least we get an idea of where we stand. In this case, I think it's important to realize also that sustainability implies a condition to be maintained over time. So green or sustainable buildings, by definition, should be able to maintain their performance over a period of time, withstanding climatic conditions. Now, the question that is interesting here is what kind of climatic conditions should buildings be expected to sustain? I think we'll explore a little bit more about that moving along. So let's get to the next question, or the first question actually for our panel. I'll read it to you both. Why should our climate goals have resilience embedded within? If Lee, you'd like to go first, and then Antonio.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So I think that climate goals are inherently they're very important, and they're also really complex, right? Because they take into that intersection of society, technology, infrastructure. All of those things are really impacted by climate change, and people are really at the heart of any climate change strategy. So I think that climate change strategies and steps and goals that we set need to be accomplished also through that lens of achieving greater social equity. We're all aware that the IPCC report has said that climate change is going to impact those in our communities that are most vulnerable. And of course, we see that. We've certainly seen that in the U.S., and I think we see that worldwide. And so it's really important that we think about achieving our climate goals, also achieving broader social equity, and resilience is such a big part of that, because we really want our communities to be resilient to the impacts that we know are coming. They're already here. They're going to get worse. Worse before they get better, if they do ever get better. And so we need to have eyes wide open as to mitigation is a huge piece of that puzzle. We want to reduce the impacts of climate change. We also need to be ready, and we need to be eyes wide open around preparing our communities to withstand the shocks and the stresses that we know are going to be coming as part of climate change that's already here.
Thank you, Lee. How about you, Antonio?
Thank you, Nicolas. And I'm with Lee in this one, because climate goals must have resilience factors within, no doubt about that. Because when we talk about building with green practices towards an inclusive net zero built environment, what we really are talking about is that we must do better to leave no one behind in terms of making more accessible the technology to have more resilience in the construction sector, while we reduce our carbon footprint. So we can reduce that 38% global emissions related to construction. And as we listened at the panel before, 70% of building in Latin America is informal. So we need to address that. And why? Because we need to keep adding more green accessible materials so that can adapt to different climate scenarios, so everyone can build with them, considering the importance of the resistance, the importance of the longevity, and the consumer resources during and after the process of building itself.
Excellent, Antonio. Thank you both very much. We're going to keep moving right along here to see if we can manage our entire agenda. So I think we're ready for our next poll question. Juanita, if you could help us out. I can read it for you. There it is. What are the critical barriers to achieve more resilient buildings? So it's multiple choice here. And you can see there are different ones there. Please go ahead and share with us what you think are the most critical barriers for achieving more resilient buildings. And same as last time, I'd like to, while the audience starts filling out the poll, I'd like to ask our panelists to help us out with their view on this. Antonio, we can start with you, and then with Lee.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yeah, regarding barriers, I can identify two main barriers, I think, to have more resilient buildings. The first one will be investment, because it is something that you cannot identify as a priority when you are an investor. Making a more resilient building to an investor sounds like expensive or an extra task. So it's not in the top of their mind. And in other words, it doesn't make your return over investment to increase if you only focus in the short term. And the second barrier, I think, is politics, and mainly a public sector framework that can give a better impulse to resilient buildings as a more accessible way to build the cities where we live in.
Thank you, Antonio. Lee, what do you think?
I'll agree with Antonio on the first one. You know, top of mind for me is the additional costs on a project that resilient infrastructure may provide. You know, it's tough for that assessment because cost savings are really the cost avoidance, which is hard to monetize, right? So unlike things like energy efficiency, which you can model because you know that you're going to be using energy, it's more difficult to know exactly when things are going to, you know, exactly when natural disasters are going to hit. And so that investment cost really is a long-term cost avoidance and really takes more of that longer-term thinking. And that's a barrier to the short-term thinking, which is how we generally consider investments. You know, I think another challenge is that we are living in a changing world. And so past experiences may not be reflected in our current state, or certainly not in our future experiences. And so when you're dealing with climate change, you know, building resilience, I think, really takes some of that bold and forward thinking that may not be inherent in how we currently think about infrastructure, right? So much of our infrastructure is designed based on what has worked in the past, right? And we're following kind of the tried and true approaches that we used to take. And the questions of investment are difficult because you have to consider how much are you investing, for what amount of benefit, and then who is benefiting, right? And so all of those pieces, again, are at the intersection of infrastructure and society and technology, and how do we consider all of these complex pieces together, you know, particularly when you're thinking about future planning. So kind of two thoughts on that. You know, one is awareness of real costs. So when we think about, oh, we can't possibly think about costs here, we know costs that have come, at least in the United States. You know, looking up some interesting statistics, climate.gov provides some really eye-opening information around costs. With respect to 2020 costs, 95 billion in damages, which was double the last 45 years average cost. So we see it even in dollars that this is getting significantly worse, and that our future scenarios are going to be different than our past scenarios. And it allows us to put a bit more of you know, sureness around what those costs are going to be. And then I think also looking at the benefits of resilience infrastructure with the benefits that can also be gained and maybe do have an ROI, like definitely that cost avoidance piece, but also comfort and health and cost savings associated with some of those other green you know, building measures. Each of those pieces, when considered in a whole, I think can make that equation around where to invest a little bit easier.
Great. Thank you very much, Lee. Okay, I think we have our audience poll back here. Yeah, definitely investment and incentive seems to be at the top of the list, but it is pretty well distributed. There are a few other, in second place we have here political commitment, obviously, and yeah, it's pretty well spread out. I think in terms of what our panelists are mentioning, it's also important to note the terms of who pays, because we're talking about cost, but also the framework we have. Often the person making that preliminary investment or upfront cost is not the person footing the bill for later. So they're obviously there. You have that situation that Antonio was mentioning, where why should I invest more now if, you know, that I'm not going to be one benefiting from this added cost into my upfront cost. So that's definitely something, a change in structure that has to occur, and it is in some places, but it's very slow. I think we tend to stick to our old ways, as Lee said. Also, an important issue to note on this point is that we know climate change has the largest impacts on the most vulnerable, right? The UN World Cities Report released last year noted that over 90% of deaths related to natural disasters occurred in low to medium income countries. So that's also an issue to take into account too, that not only do we know that these impacts are larger and more devastating as time moves forward, but it's also the most vulnerable, as per usual, the ones who are suffering the most. So it brings it, I think, much more upfront. Furthermore, I don't want to get you guys all down, but just one more data to keep in mind. Furthermore, the same study also revealed that over 2/3 of the global population that live in cities that have greater inequalities in income now than they did in 1980. So that vulnerability seems to be increasing, not only because of population growth, but also because of that parameter we have a larger difference between different incomes. So things to keep in mind as we go forward this. So therefore, the economic inequalities resulting in larger vulnerable populations creates an understandable focus on short-term problem solving. It's not a mystery as why do people keep focusing on the short term. There is also obligation in some situations where they don't have a choice but to attend the immediate emergency and they can't see more medium or long term. So having said that, this brings us to a good place to ask our panel to share their answers on our third question. What are the main barriers to investing in resilience? Focusing more in now on the exact investment barrier. So I'll read it again. What are the main barriers to investing in resilience? This time, Lee, we can start with you, and then Antonio.
Yeah, I hate to say that, but I think that was what I was talking about before, which is I think the main barriers to investing are the unsureness on the future costs, and maybe also generally a lack of best practices. This is a relatively new investment that we need to be considering, and those strategies, while they may be tried and true in some areas, may not be in all areas. And so you may not have that kind of comfort with respect to those people that are investing in that infrastructure around what are those best practices, and are they really going to work, and do I really trust and understand that these are the right strategies, and also resilience can mean a lot of different things to people. And so, resilience is a broad term. It's being used more frequently now, but there may also be generally, how do you assess it? What exactly is it? And how do you value it? And I'm assuming, there's also just a lot of different opinions and potentially confusion around even some of those basic questions.
Definitely. Thank you, Lee. I think that you bring up a good point there. I just want to point this out before we move forward. Obviously, this is an ARN webinar, the America's Regional Network of the World Green Building Council. So we are talking basically from Canada to Chile and everything in between. So there is a huge diversity in different markets and where we each stand on that. Nevertheless, it is important to note that there are plenty of opportunities for, peer-to-peer learning, what worked here, what didn't work here, and no need for someone to start walking through mistakes that other economies or markets have already gone through in the past and try to learn from each other in that sense. But yeah, there is a diverse situations, and obviously we're at different moments in our development, but it makes it tough, but also a lot of opportunity in there as well. Antonio, please give us your answer to the question. Would you like me to read it again?
No, I got it. Nicolas.
Okay.
Thank you. And actually, I'm with you in something that you said about when we talk about barriers in investment. We need to say, or we need to focus on the social. Sorry, we need to focus on the social investment about this, because our main gap is in the green building construction that can happen for the ones that lives for all the people in communities that are living in poverty. So in terms of being affected by the climate change, these are the population that are most affected by them. So living in that vulnerable state of poverty don't have access to a better place of living, gives to the people like a very short amount of responses that they can do with their homes. So I think that to give access to a more resilient place, or to give access to a more resilient technology to live to the whole society, that's pretty much a topic about investment, and pretty much linked it with public policies as well, I think. So when we talk about barriers, I would say that social investment is the main barrier, because the public sector is not investing in about this. And the second one is, how do we make this spread out through the society, so everyone can have the opportunity to have the materials and the technology to build a house.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you. Yes, definitely. I think at least to give a Central American perspective, in the building sector, at least here in Central America, it has historically is primarily operated under a lowest eligible bid framework, right? So this translates into a persistent need to reduce costs, focusing primarily on upfront investments. This has generated great accomplishments in regards to project management, yield optimization, and technological innovation. Nevertheless, the resilience of projects has often been one of the major victims of budget reductions disguised as value engineering, right? So when investment decisions are based on very short-term goals, this is what happens. A building that can withstand the biggest expected storm in the next 40 years does not cost the same as one that can withstand the biggest expected storm in the next 80 years. Even more so when we're not even sure what kind of storm we can expect in the next 10 years. So this all comes together, giving us a pretty complicated situation. In other words, let's say the sweet spot where a building's resilience in regards to climate change intersects with a cost that is economically feasible in a way that it can be sustainable for a developing economy has become increasingly hard to determine. So this is, I think, definitely a very important barrier to overcome, at least for our region here. But I'm sorry, we have a question here from WGBC that I'm going to put forth for our panel. Just give me 1 second to pop it up here. Yes, we have a question here that is, what advice do the panelists have for overcoming the cost divide of understanding who pays for the initial investment versus who benefits? An example, why should a developer pay for energy efficiency when they plan to sell the units to homeowners who value location and amenities more? Lee, would you like to take a crack at that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the classic split incentive issue that is we always deal with when a developer is not going to be the end user. So, one is having the government provide incentives that are going to benefit society at large, and having developers be able to take advantage of those, or the end users be able to take advantage of those. So is there a role for government incentives and policy to play there in terms of understanding that that's a hard decision for a developer to make? An interesting solution that the JCI is looking at is engaging with developers in providing some innovative financing and as a service modeling for end users to essentially have a service contract with JCI that lowers the upfront cost and provides a guarantee of performance over 10 or 15 years. So you're able to kind of balance out some of those costs while making sure that you're really getting tangible benefits for that service cost moving forward. And some interesting models, the flexible kind of risk sharing and other interesting models that we're looking at there. Oftentimes financing, not the technology solution, but such a critical piece of a project moving forward, and of the right project moving forward, and of the right considerations, not being value engineered out. So, a lot of creative thinking being done around that.
Great, thanks, Lee. How about you, Antonio?
Well, I don't know if there is so much to say because Lee already said that. I think it's something about benefits as well, because I don't know. The thing is that we need to get all that, we need to cover that gap of social housing. And when we talk about social housing, the costs are really, really important in terms of building. So if there is non-benefit for the constructor to add all these technologies in place, so the people that are going to live there after can have them, I don't know, it might be a difficult question to solve. So I would say, and I'm with Lee in this one, that benefits are the main answer to split the cost and to have the solution about this.
Excellent, thank you. I think at least in Costa Rica, something that has worked well that we've seen in the past for this precise situation are some financing options that a few banks have, which I don't know the financial term. I think it's front and back end loans. Where they will, if a project meets certain criteria in terms of certification, if it's LEED this or whatever, if it has meets their criteria in terms of certification, they will give let's say preferential credit conditions to the developer to develop the project, right? and that in terms of grace periods, lower interest rates, this and that, different benefits. But they also give a back-end loan on the same project to the final buyer. So the buyer will be benefiting in that sense from same thing, better conditions, lower interest, this and that, and different opportunities, because the project has certain characteristics. And that obviously is a selling point for the developer. That's something that he can benefit from in terms of better pre-sale percentages and things like that, because it gives them leverage, let's say, to move that project in a great term. And it is in that sense, even though they're not going to be the ones benefiting directly from those savings, let's say in energy bills or water consumption bills, they will be have this tool or this let's say this carrot to dangle and help them make a quicker sales up front. So that has worked here, but yeah, it's a tricky subject. I'm going to move along so we don't get caught up for time. Our next question, let's see here. The next question we have for you guys is, how has the sustainable building movement strengthened the market to access strategies, resources, and opportunities to build resilience within cities and countries in the context of preparing or recovering from natural disasters? Either one of you can raise their hand if you want me to read that one again. It's a little long. You guys okay with that one? Yeah? Okay. So how about this time we go first with Antonio?
Okay, thank you, Nicolas. Well, in Techo, we have responded to several emergencies, like I was telling you before, as a result of natural disasters, like earthquakes, I don't know, in El Salvador in 2001, and in Chile and Haiti in 2010, and a month ago, and Mexico in 2017, hurricanes, two in Puerto Rico in 2017, and Guatemala and Honduras last year, Eta and Iota, and the fire volcano eruption in Guatemala too in 2018. We have experience in this emergency response. And with the years, all this experience on the field made us see that it's important to improve in the answers that we give and that we design for these projects. Because at the beginning, we thought that the more easy to implement solutions, the better. But now we think that the more sustainable and resilient solutions, the better, because we work with communities that probably won't have another solution in the near future. And what happens if another hurricane hits tomorrow? A house is not only infrastructure. A house is also an opportunity to start over and to have access to a better future for the next generations. So we need to address the sustainable topic to the design of answers when we talk about emergency solving responses for natural disasters.
Thank you, Antonio. How about you, Lee?
Yeah, so I think that the green building market has been strengthening over the last, 20, 30 years with standards that have been in place, really driving market leadership in that area. And so as those types of buildings become more prevalent, you are seeing, again, the overlap of those elements of those green buildings with resilient buildings, those best practices, those durable materials, those solutions and those strategies becoming more widely available, particularly driven by demand. And I think we're seeing that now even more so with respect to the IPCC report, other commitments that are coming out across companies, across countries, where they're demanding these types of solutions, and market participants all the way up and down the supply chain are responding to that, and they're hearing that, and that demand is going to drive more availability for everyone globally.
Excellent. Thank you both. Okay, I'm going to keep moving here. We're just barely on time. We're doing all right. We're having great teamwork here. In closing, I would like to put forth the final question for our panel. That is, what opportunities do you see for green buildings to contribute to the development of resilient cities and communities? This time, Lee, if you want, we'll go with you first, and then Antonio.
Sure. So that question certainly brings to mind distributed energy resources, particularly those that are renewables or carbon free. There's a huge opportunity to incorporate that into your green building strategy. And investments in battery and storage really provide customers with opportunities to reduce their costs significantly through participation with utility programs or other incentives that may be available. And importantly for resilience, those distributed energy resources also can support that passive survivability that we've talked about and provide the backup power during disruption. So that's one of those great places where, schools and other public buildings, the investment of distributed energy that allows them to island from the grid is a really key strategy that provides a lot of opportunity, both for potentially cost benefits as well as major resilience benefits in the event that is needed. I think so, other opportunities or investment in green building strategies like increased building insulation, innovations in water capture and cleaning on site, the ability to island, all of those pieces of the green building infrastructure that also provides that resilient infrastructure, I think really provides a lot of opportunity to extend the life of buildings, to reduce the repair costs of buildings, and to make those incredibly valuable societally with respect to that social equity piece and also the cost avoidance piece.
Great. Thanks a lot, Lee. Antonio?
Yes, but I think rebuilding can change the approach to talk about community resilience from another angle as a strategy, in a way that we can start thinking in the implementation of a solution from its core problem instead of the problem that we can see in front of us. This might teach us to replicate how nature has been adapting to changes for several years. And I think the main core of this approach must be to make technology affordable for everyone. So we can develop this different angle of seeing green building as something that can be spread in the whole construction sector.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonio. I think also an important opportunity is that green buildings represent the most cost-effective way to reduce GHG emissions. And given that the building sector footprint is expected to double by 2060, if we can manage to build smarter, we do have the opportunity to make an enormous impact. The thing is that we obviously have to change, as our panelists have mentioned, the way we used to do things and adapt these new ways of doing them. But given the fact that we are going to be building so much, if we do it right, we obviously have an opportunity for great impact. I think this comes together also with at least something that we see in our region, a change in paradigm where cities and municipalities are being empowered more and more to make their own decisions for their city, for their local jurisdiction. Things that were all managed by the central government are slowly being released and given to them to be managed by the cities. So you have international programs like the ones that WRI runs or that the World Green Building Council is involved with, where we're actually engaging with cities and helping them learn from each other and, let's say, accelerate the way that policy is being adapted and impacting their local communities, which, as we know, is where, as I think you guys say, where the tire meets the road, where you actually get like impact and traction, you start to see things happen. So I think that change in paradigm where municipalities are being empowered really is also a great opportunity to get things done quickly and learn from others quickly. Let's see here. Okay, in terms of, we're just about at the end of our time. We're doing very well. I'd like to know if there are any closing remarks from either one of you. Anything you'd like to say to the audience based on what we've talked about, or leave them with thoughts or homework or anything like that. Antonio, this time, if you like, we'll start with you.
Okay, excellent. I will say that, yeah, we don't have to forget that when we talk about climate change, we're talking about communities that live in a poverty situation and that are continuously affected by their effects. So we need to develop more sustainable solutions that can reach that public. Otherwise, we are just focusing on the tip of the iceberg. I think that's mainly the message that I want to give to the audience, and to take in mind that we need to develop a more affordable solution, so we can work with others and with the people to solve this issue.
Thank you, Antonio. Lee, any closing remarks on your behalf?
Thanks. Conversations like this, I think, really drive home the need and the urgency to have more green building, to have more resilient building. Really driving home the thing that I'm focused on every day, which is at JCI, really providing those solutions to customers to allow them to take a leadership position here and make it easy for them to make those tough decisions. So, decarbonization continues to be a huge focus, resilient continues to be a huge focus. I feel stronger in this work after having this conversation. So thanks so much for the ability to participate.
Great, excellent. Well, in that case, on behalf of the GPCs that can form the Americas Regional Network, I would like to thank both Lee and Antonio for being with us here today and sharing their valuable insight and experience with our audience. For our audience, if you would like to find more resources regarding some of the topics that we've discussed in this session, please feel free to visit the World GBC website and contact your local GBC to find out how you can get involved in local initiatives that contribute to global goals. Thank you for joining us.